Today we're talking about my top bounce back players for 2020, coming right up. Welcome to the Gridiron Fantasy Football podcast today. Today is Sunday, July 12th, 2020. I am Chip and I'm your host. Thank you so much for listening. If you're a new listener, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and now we're on iHeartRadio. You can also watch us on YouTube at Gridiron Fantasy Football. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss another episode. Now, I wanted to start with this. I wanted to kind of thank the ones that are out there that are listening to my podcast. About a month and a half ago, I decided to do this podcast because, if you have been listening to me from the beginning, I practice physical therapy here in Washington State. And unfortunately, with the pandemic and everything, I had to go on reduced hours. So I haven't been working a full 40 hours every week. And I've always had a passion for fantasy football, and I never really found the right moment to do it. I never found the moment where I could be like, what, I have a passion for this, I want to start this. And, this was the moment where I was like, back in May, I was like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do what I love doing. I love talking about football. I love talking about fantasy football, all types of sports. Sometimes my patients get really frustrated with me because I talk to them about sports all the time. And once I find that one patient who really wants to talk about fantasy football, I go on and on about. So it's just something I just love talking about. And I think that it was really good for me to be able to do that because it allowed me to finally focus on things I'm passionate about. And even though I do have a career in physical therapy, I just want to do something that really I enjoyed. Not saying I don't enjoy my job, but enjoy, other things outside of where football season is one of my favorite times of the year. The fall season is one of my favorite times of the year. And I just wanted to finally go ahead and start this fantasy football channel. So, I've only been a month and a half in, and honestly, it's been a slow process. It's been something that I sometimes get frustrated with, where I expected a better success coming out of the gate, but I know all this stuff is a marathon. You're never going to start something that's going to be, it's going to blow up right away. So I know as long as you put in the work and you provide good information, the channel will grow. But I've been looking at my analytics for the podcast, for the YouTube channel and everything like that. And I just wanted to thank all my listeners who have been listening to my podcast, every single podcast that drops. And right now I'm going to recognize the top 3 areas that I've seen the most downloads from. And I do this podcast out of Tacoma, Washington. If you're not familiar with Washington State, Seattle is the big city, and then about 45 minutes south is a city called Tacoma. It's another pretty big city. So that's where I practice physical therapy. That's where I live. And so right now, my top 3 downloads for my podcast are Tacoma, Washington. So everybody who is listening from Tacoma, Washington, I really appreciate that. For my second most downloads is from Puyallup, Washington. So everyone in Puyallup, thank you so much for listening. And then this one's kind of a random one, and I have a listener in France. And bonjour. So I am grateful that I have somebody in France, and the person that's in France, I don't know who you are obviously, but thank you so much for listening to my podcast every single time it drops. It means a lot. It means a lot for me to be able to put something out there just a month and a half ago and see that I'm reaching people all over the United States, but also in a different country and all that stuff. So I really don't know how to say this other than thank you so much for being a listener to this podcast. And I hope that as we grow, as things continue, I'll be able to do a lot more for the listeners. But right now, all I can really do is give you a big thank you. And I hope you continue to like the show. If there's anything that you guys that are listening or women who are listening want to see more of, please let me know, because I want to make sure that I'm doing this podcast for you and you guys are getting everything you need from a fantasy football standpoint. So thank you so much. So going to that, I'm going to go in some of the news that's going on around the NFL this past week. And right now, Raheem Mostert has requested a trade from the 49ers per his agent. He turned it on, last year in the playoffs. I mean, it was crazy what he did in the NFC Championship game against the Packers, and then he went on and played in the Super Bowl and everything. And Raheem Mostert was going to be a big. He's been around the fantasy football world as one of those guys that people are choosing to break out, and it's going to be interesting to see what the 49ers do with him. I don't think he gets traded. I think they're just going to keep him. But when you saw Matt Breida get traded to the Dolphins, and then you saw the emergence of Raheem Mostert in the playoffs and late last season, you're like, okay, this guy is going to be a star once he gets that opportunity to be a full-time player. So once Matt Breida left, it felt like, okay, Raheem Mostert, that was his chance. But the 49ers still have Jerick McKinnon, they still have Tevin Coleman, they still have Jeff Wilson. So there are some things in that running back depth chart that is kind of concerning in the sense of, will he be a true breakout this year? But we've seen that players that are in Kyle Shanahan's offense at the running back position succeed. He knows how to utilize all of his running backs, and it'll be interesting to see what the market would be for Raheem Mostert when or if a team actually wants to trade for him. So just something to keep an eye on. Just stay tuned to that, and just keep your ears to the ground based on Raheem Mostert. And then also, this is a weird one for me. This is a kind of the change of what's going on in the NFL. The NFL has banned post-game jersey swaps, which I don't understand. I don't understand why these guys can play 3 hours on the field, 4 quarters, tackling, hitting each other, sweating, all these things, but then you can't swap jerseys after the game. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. It's something that I feel like, I know the NFL is trying to find ways to mitigate risk and trying to figure out what can we do that's pre-game, post-game that helps mitigate some of the risk for the COVID stuff. And I don't know. I know that protocols will continue to be evolving. I know they're going to continue to come with new things, but it just seems like these guys are playing a game, for so long, tackling and everything, and then you can't allow them to do jersey swaps. Like, that don't make any sense. But I know that for us to be able to have an NFL season this year, we have to kind of agree to all the things that are taking place for us to be able to have fans in the stadiums and players to be safe and all that. But that's kind of what it is this year. It's going to be a whole different NFL season this year, and we'll see. And lastly, saying that, the Jacksonville Jaguars are reporting that they will see up to about 25% of their capacity this season, which may be an increase in attendance to these games. I'm not really sure how that's going to look for the Jags, but I do know that it's, in all seriousness, this is probably going to be the protocol throughout the whole entire year through all the teams, because they have already had talks where they're going to go ahead and put like tarps on the lower bowl and try to put advertising and stuff like that to kind of help with some of the revenue. But it'll be interesting to see how they map out how to put fans in the stadium. So it's definitely going to be interesting. Stay tuned to all the news that's coming out with the players and the league in itself and all that stuff, because every day things are changing, and right now it's still determined, like, we don't know if the players are actually going to report at the end of the month for training camp. So it's all going to be an interesting off-season until we actually get to the season and see if there's actually going to be a season that's going to start on time. So just continue to keep up on the news, and I'll continue to provide that news as I get it and as I see it and provide it for you all. But right now, today, we are going to talk about, today I'm revealing my bounce back players for 2020. So a bounce back player can be anybody who obviously was highly ranked last year, who didn't perform to their ADP, to anybody who's coming off injury and stuff like that, because I think every year we have players that we hope for that are going to turn on and break out, and then you draft them at a certain draft spot, and they just don't pan out for you, and then it kind of hurts your whole entire team throughout the season. So right now I'm going to go ahead and go through my quarterbacks. I have 2 quarterbacks. I got two players for each position that I'm going to talk about. And right now, my first quarterback I'm going to reveal as my bounce back player for 2020 is going to be Baker Mayfield. He ended the season last year as QB 20. He had huge expectations last year, and he just didn't deliver. He had a good rookie season. He threw for the most rookie passing touchdowns in 2018. I had him on my roster in my 2 quarterback league. He was a guy that I had and I played in my championship game. And I'm a big fan of Baker Mayfield. I think he has he has the intangibles to be a very good quarterback. And so when you saw him last year have OBJ, they brought Kareem Hunt, but Kareem Hunt didn't really do anything until later on in the season after suspension. You have David Njoku, you had Jarvis Landry, you had all these players around him, and you're like, okay, this is the season that Baker Mayfield can be that top 5 fantasy quarterback. And he did have all the weapons last year to provide that, and unfortunately, it just didn't happen. I just think there was so much, inner issues with the team that caused maybe some tension that caused that team to not maybe perform to what you expect. But you think when Freddie Kitchens was the offensive coordinator when he was a rookie, and then he becomes the head coach, you don't think there would be much of a fallout in the sense of like Baker Mayfield's performance. But I do know, just like anything else, defenses are going to scheme for quarterbacks, and they're going to try to take away what he does best. And the thing that was revealing last year about Baker Mayfield, that he always rolled right of the formation. So anytime he got in trouble, he always rolled right. So that's what happened with the defenses. They knew that if they pushed him to the right, they knew they could limit half the field for him. So that's something that I think hopefully he can change in this offseason, where Baker Mayfield can see the field, make good decisions, and I think he will succeed this year. I think that if you look at what they have, you'll have a healthy OBJ, you add Austin Hooper to the offense. I just think that he's in another position to succeed. And I think that when you have a coach like Kevin Stefanski coming in, I really think that that's going to really help Baker Mayfield get what he needs in a sense of coaching, the mechanics, the right plays and everything like that. I mean, he just needs to protect the ball a lot better. And he also has the 4th easiest strength of schedule next year. So I think that really helps him when it comes to fantasy, looking at what he has strength of schedule wise and the upside that he does have. I mean, he's going to be drafted super late in drafts, and I think that he will exceed the expectations of where he's drafted. So really look at Baker Mayfield as a bounce back play for this year. The second player that I have on my list is probably gonna get a lot of hate for this, but I do think that Phillip Rivers is going to have a bounce back season. However, I do think based on last year's performance, obviously he has to bounce back. I mean, I think a new beginning was good for him. I think going to an offense it's not the same. I think the Chargers offense is a lot better, but I do think the little things that are better for Phillip Rivers will help him succeed. He was, right now he is being drafted, like right now his ECR is quarterback 24. So he ended the season as the QB 18. Now, like I said before, he doesn't have the talent around him, but he does arguably have the best offensive line. So we know that Phillip Rivers is not a mobile quarterback. And when he gets in trouble, he likes to dump it off to his running back and the tight end and everything like that. So I do think that having a better offensive line gives him better time and will be able to be the guy that we saw that can be a successful fantasy quarterback. Now, he's not going to be I don't think I see him as a top 10 guy, but I do think that he's a guy that you can stream. He's a guy that, when you look at the talent he has around him, yes, T.Y. Hilton, who I think is going to have a good season. You add the rookie Michael Pittman. Then you have Jack Doyle. I mean, he has a good tight end. You have 2 good running backs in Marlon Mack, and then you add Jonathan Taylor to that mix. I mean, he may have more appeal to 2 quarterback leagues as a value draft pick, but I still believe that Frank Wright is going to do very good with Phillip Rivers, just like I feel like Kevin Stefanski is going to do well with Baker Mayfield. I just think that was a right offense. When someone goes out and gets someone like Phillip Rivers, like Frank Wright wanted Phillip Rivers, I think there's still something left in Phillip Rivers where he can be one of those quarterbacks where you can play. If you're in a 2 quarterback league, he may not be an every week quarterback for you, but he's definitely a streamer. He's definitely somebody you can add and to your bench and just have him as depth, whatever. More like I said, in the more in a 2 quarterback league, but I think that he'll have a better season than QB where he's getting drafted as QB 24. Now on to my running backs. My first running back bounce back player I have is David Johnson. This has been the weirdest rise and fall for an elite running back, I think, in a while, where I feel like David Johnson is so talented where for some reason, he just didn't click in the offense last year. Which was weird because he started the season pretty good. I mean, he averaged 20 PPR points weeks 1 through 6. So when you see someone doing pretty well in the beginning of the season, all of a sudden he just continues to not get played. They traded for Kenyon Drake and all these things happen. It's like David Johnson was like the gold mine of pickups when he was a rookie and then his second season. I mean, it's crazy to kind of see a guy that's so talented and still is talented not be used in the way he was out of nowhere, because I know he had some injuries last year as well, but weeks 1 through 6, he was a stud running back, and all of a sudden he ended the season, and then he ended the season not really doing much, obviously, and then he gets traded to Houston. So I think that's where the benefit is. He's going to go to Houston, and I think he can be elite again. I think the Houston Texans are going to utilize him like he's always been known to be utilized. I mean, I know he's 28, but I think he still can be a workhorse running back. I still think that he has the talent. I mean, he's a dual threat. Obviously he's a great runner and he's a great receiver. So I think that you add that to the offense, and when they lose DeAndre Hopkins, David Johnson could benefit from that. So I think that with him being able to do two things well as running back and receiver, it's going to be a good thing for him. I feel like he'll have that bounce back season. I know they still have Duke Johnson. Duke Johnson is a pass catching running back as well, but I honestly don't think there's any reason to take David Johnson off the field. If he's healthy and he's striving on offense, like I can see David Johnson being the running back and never coming off the field, and Duke Johnson coming in just for change of pace type of plays. But I still think David Johnson going to Houston will let him become a workhorse running back, which will obviously make his fantasy value go up. So I do think that David Johnson is a bounce back candidate. And just like David Johnson, my second running back, I have Todd Gurley. I mean, just like David Johnson, right? Gurley has a new home in Atlanta. Gurley was a beast in 2017, 2018. I mean, he went from going from the Jeff Fisher offense to going to Sean McVay and completely changed how he was utilized. And we saw just everything Todd Gurley can do. He's one of my favorite running backs. And obviously there was something going on last year with him in LA. Like, I don't know if it was the knee. I mean, he injured his knee, had an ankle issue, then the scheme. I don't know if there was any beef within like the team, whatever, but it just seemed like last year was very weird to see him underutilized. And we don't know. I mean, was it his knee? Was it his ankle? Was it, what was the purpose for it? Like, it's so weird to see a guy that was a monster for 2 straight years not be used much last year. I mean, but we will find out this year how much he has left in the tank, how much his knee will hold up. I mean, he takes over for Devontae Freeman over in Atlanta, which was very good in the Falcons offense when he was healthy. So, Gurley did still end last year as the RB14, and he had 14 total touchdowns. So the touchdowns were there. He just didn't have the production like he did with rushing and receiving. So I do think Todd Gurley is undervalued. I do think that people are going to overlook him. And I think the same as like Le'Veon Bell too. I think Le'Veon Bell gets kind of overlooked. But I do think that, there's no one else to get the ball in Atlanta when it comes to rushing. I mean, he's going to get all the touches in Atlanta. I think more than he can handle. The issue is, will he be able to hold up with all the touches he will get? Now going on to my wide receiver bounce back players. My number 1 receiver candidate for bounce back season is Odell Beckham Jr. Now, OBJ was dealing with a hip and hernia injury last year. We obviously saw that he wasn't able to play to the elite level that we're accustomed to. I mean, this is something we've dealt with OBJ through his whole career, that he just can't stay on the field for a whole season. But it did finally make sense on why he wasn't doing well. I mean, we had no idea that he was dealing with any type of injury. And then after the season, it all made sense. We're like, okay, he's dealing with a sports hernia and all that stuff. And that to me makes me feel like, okay, if OBJ is healthy, well, he's obviously going to be, he should be the top target for the Cleveland Browns. So I think for him, it's obvious he can be a bounce back player, and he's going to be underdrafted too. Last year he had 133 targets, and 25% of the target share, second to Jarvis Landry. So Jarvis Landry obviously was, from a target share and standpoint, he was behind, like OBJ was behind Landry, but OBJ did lead the league or lead the team in air yards. So I do think that this year he's going to have to be more efficient, because I think with the addition of Austin Hooper, you have Kareem Hunt the whole season, he will see a dip in targets, I believe, but I do think that he could be more efficient with the targets he does get. So hopefully, he'll get more red zone targets. Hopefully he'll get more red zone touchdowns to make up for the fact that he's not going to get the targets. So if he can stay healthy, he definitely will be value at where you'll draft him. And I have no reason to believe that he cannot be a wide receiver 1 next season. So we'll definitely see. But I think Kevin Stefanski will do a lot of things to get him moving around, to get him the ball. And so I think OBJ is going to be a very good pick next year. And then my second receiver I have Juju Smith-Schuster. It definitely was a disappointment last year to see Juju have a bad season. I mean, everyone had all this hype around him, and I know that the offense was awful without Big Ben. I know he dealt with the knee, a toe injury, a concussion, just too many things happening to someone at once, to especially to someone who's trying to prove that they don't need AB to be successful. And I do think Juju is an elite receiver. I think this year you see that. I think that when you have a roster where you have someone like Deontay Johnson, who everyone wants to kind of also add as a breakout candidate, you have James Washington, you have Chase Claypool, you added the free agent Eric Ebron. I don't know. I just think that we're gonna see Juju come back and be that breakout guy. Now, I say that to say this, is that we need to see Big Ben healthy. If Big Ben is healthy, I do believe that this is where Juju, value comes from. So if we saw last year with all the quarterback changes that the Pittsburgh Steelers had, it definitely limited Juju. So hopefully, if Big Ben stays healthy the whole entire season, I can't see why Juju can't be a fringe wide receiver 1 next year. So really look at that as a guy that you can get later on in your draft as a value too. Now for my tight end position, my number 1 tight end I have is Evan Engram. I know that this seems like an odd pick to most people due to his current ADP right now. He's ranked somewhere between 6 and 8, depending on what rankings you're looking at. But however, I think what I said earlier in the podcast is that injuries to players, and when they don't perform to the level you expect them the year before, I do think that gives you a reason to be a bounce back player. I think that as long as you're able to come back and be fantasy relevant from the year that you were prior, that I do believe that allows you to be a candidate for being a bounce back player. So based on the 2019 stats, he had 44 receptions for 68 targets, and he had 467 yards and 3 touchdowns. And that was only in the 9 games that he played. He got injured, so we didn't see what he could have done throughout the whole entire season, but he was tied for the most targets, or the target share of the New York Giants. He had 22% of the target share. So that, to me, obviously shows that he's going to be utilized in the offense. We know that Engram is talented. We know that he can be elite. We've seen it every year that he's been in the league so far. But the problem is he just can't stay healthy. So when he's on the field, he's a mismatch. It's no doubt. And last year he was having another good year when he was scoring double-digit PPR points 7 out of the 9 games. So when you see what he was doing, he's relevant in PPR leagues and fantasy. It's just it's hard for him to stay healthy. So when you look at that, and then you look at, can you see a reduction in targets? Can you see other players like Golden Tate? You obviously got Barkley. Are these guys going to take a lot of the targets away from Engram? Possibly, but I do think when he's on the field, it's hard not to play him. There's always a chance that he's going to have a good game. So he is risky due to durability, but I think that if he stays healthy, he's going to have a bounce back season. And finally, my last tight end and last player on my list, I have Chris Herndon. So Chris Herndon he had a productive rookie season. He's a tight end for the New York Jets, and in 2018, he had a very good season. He was on analysts' list last year for being a breakout, but a suspension and injuries derailed the breakout. But in 2018, he was the tight end 16. He was 4th on the team in target share. His average depth of target was 11 yards. So that means that they use him. They utilize him down the field, stretching the field. He was third on the team in air yards, and he played 62% of the offensive snaps. So now Robbie Anderson is now in Carolina, right? So I can see Herndon being one of Darnold's main targets. I mean, the only people that are coming back from last season that has any familiarity with Darnold is Jamison Crowder and Chris Herndon. So I think early in the season, you're going to see that chemistry there. And I know that with, Brashon Perriman and they add Mims as the other rookie receiver, I think it'll take time for these guys to get adjusted. So I do think that, if there's a preseason, really look at how the New York Jets use Chris Herndon. And this could be a guy that you could pick up early in the season that I can see Chris Herndon being a early season waiver wire claim. So just see how things are being used with him. See how he's read up on some reports on training camp, and if there's a preseason, what he does in the preseason. But Chris Herndon is definitely a guy that I can see being a bounce back candidate. So that's it. So those are my bounce back candidates. I think that it's interesting to go through this list and kind of see exactly what players I decided to choose from. But these are guys that are going to be value picks in your draft. So look at the list. If there's a list, there's other players that you want to bring up, just let me know. But yeah. So thank you so much for listening today. Please like, comment, and share. Next episode, I will be discussing my undervalued players for 2020. So please don't hit subscribe so you don't miss another episode. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter at the Gridiron Pod, and on Instagram at Gridiron Fantasy Football. That's it for today. Have a great day, and we'll see y'all in the next episode. Take care.